about our supply chain issues and how that's affecting us. I thought that I would start out on that because that is a big feature of what's happening. I did some calculations for us. Our cost increases have gone up 22% over the past year, which is fairly significant. A lot of those is the price increases that are coming on because of our supply chain issues. We just received a letter from one of our flooring vendors this week. I wanted to read it to you. Escalating global raw material, transportation, labor, and energy costs have challenged the global supply chain at unprecedented levels. At Interface, we work diligently in a difficult environment to delay and offset the impact to our customers. We can no longer absorb the steady increases that we have experienced. We will be taking up to a 10% increase across our commercial flooring portfolio, including carpet, LVT, rubber, and adhesives. The pricing will be effective with all orders shipped on or after January 3rd. The freight surcharge on LVT and rubber, as announced in August of 2021, will remain in effect until the cost of global freight moderates. We appreciate your continued business and understanding as we weather these unusual circumstances. And we see this going on more and more. My anticipation is we will see from this 22% from last year, at least a minimum of another 10% increase in prices this year as inflation still continues to go up. As inflation goes up, we're going to find is labor wages going up. We just announced at our holiday party on this Saturday that we would be giving a 6% raise across the board to all of our employees just to try to keep up with the cost of living. You're going to see that happening everywhere, especially in the construction industry. And as those wage increases come up, we will see that reflected in pricing as our price needs to go up from our subcontractors. Things are obviously a lot slower. Permitting is still a huge issue in the area. After going through this for nearly 2 years, we still haven't quite figured out how to kind of resolve the permitting issues. Some municipalities are better than others who have better online systems beforehand, but municipalities like Portland is still really struggling, and permits are taking anywhere from 4 to 6 months. Material deliveries. One of the things you talked about is the shutting down of the Canadian border. Glass, most of our glass came out of Canada for a really long time. And so that is one of the very most difficult things to get right now is glass. Glass is typically 4 to 5 weeks out from any time that you measure it. And flooring is another issue. So we're going to see continued cost increases throughout the year. We're going to see slower time frames for being able to get material in. Because oddly enough, construction is still really kind of booming right now. And so what we have, again, typical inflationary type stuff, we have more demand than we do material and labor to meet that demand at this point right now. We had a labor shortage in the country before this started, especially in construction. We have a greater labor shortage now. It's getting paid more now just to try to keep it in place, but it is going to be difficult to get contractors out there, and you're going to see a really, I think, significant increase in prices. So that being all said, we'll go ahead and start my presentation, and we'll sort of talk you through how we can educate our clients on their pricing, how to make it more palatable before we get started, and make sure that they go into their processes with the best amount of knowledge that you can give them. And here we go. Okay. Everybody see my screen? Okay. So
we're looking at your File Explorer, Rick, instead of your PowerPoint.
Oh. Let's see. How do I? Sorry, I am not a technological genius. That I am not.
There you go.
Oh, is that better?
Yep, but then are you going to change it to the actual slide view, or?
Well, that was the part. Let me see how I do that. Nope, that's not it.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, about that. Gosh, I learned something today, and I will likely forget by tomorrow. That's the problem. So anyway, this is understanding the process to help your client navigate through a successful build out. I'm actually going so I look like I'm actually looking at you while I'm doing this. So here's some of our budgeting obstacles that we run into. Misunderstandings regarding leasing.
Rick, when you did that,
Hey, yeah, that did not work, Rick. Rick, that did not work.
All right. We'll just keep it here.
Yep, perfect.
I'm done experimenting. And our initial space location and then cost directly not associated with construction. When I talk about misunderstanding regarding leases, I want to talk about the impetus of why I created this program in the first place. I created this a little bit over a decade ago. I do a lot of dental work in the Portland market, and I had a dentist who leased a space and then came to me afterwards and said, hey, I've got this great space. I went to a presentation once and they told me that dental, which at that time was $100 a square foot build out, and I'm getting a $75 a square foot tenant improvement allowance. So I'm only going to be paying $25 out of pocket. What he didn't understand from the presentation he was at, that most of the time when a contractor gives you pricing, it's from a vanilla shell condition. And this was a gray shell space. And it was a big space. It was really designed more for a restaurant than a dental. Didn't have all the concrete in, so it was going to be fairly expensive to get it to the vanilla shell condition. So he was really $50 in the hole from the get-go without understanding it. He didn't understand his lease conditions. He didn't understand what his tenant improvement allowance was for and what that money was supposed to go to. And so I wanted to put this together to sort of help educate my clients for them to understand what is the purpose of a TI allowance. Why is it given? What is the purpose of it? And how does that help to defray the cost that you have to build out the rest of your tenant improvement? A lot of that has to do, again, with the initial space conditions, because that's going to make a huge difference as to what our costs are. We have to try to educate our clients on that. So there are many different types of languages in here. People sort of use different languages. These are the ones we use: gray shell, vanilla shell. People use the term warm shell, but you also have existing conditions. And it's important that your client understand exactly the condition of the space that they're getting. Again, that has a lot to do with what kind of TI allowance they're getting, why they're getting the certain amount that they're getting, so that they understand what that money goes to, and they still understand what they have to pay out of pocket in order to get their tenant improvement, their restaurant, their retail space, their medical space. So again, most of us are familiar with these terms. I use this presentation for a lot. I teach it at the dental school, and I've gone to many different places to teach this, and so I try to educate my clients as to what these conditions mean when they hear this terminology that they're not familiar with, what they can expect. And I think it's important for you also to educate.
So Rick, this is Cliff. Rick,
Yeah.
this is Cliff. I'm going to interrupt you one more time. I'm so sorry to do this, but I've been getting some calls from some of the people online that they can really barely understand you. There's really something going on with your mic system, and it's super fuzzy. So I don't know if we want to have you log on and log off, or use a different computer. But for some reason, it is really difficult to understand you.
Another option, Rick, is mute your computer audio and dial in using the phone number.
Well, why don't I try to do that? I have this phone number, so let me do that.
Okay.
See if that will work better.
Perfect.
Don't forget to mute the computer when you do that.
Yes, sir.
We can hear you perfectly, Rick. You're doing great.
Okay. Are we good now?
I think we're much better. Like it's almost 100% improvement. Yep. Very, very good. So I will
All
go
right.
back on mute, and looks like one problem solved a little bit. But you need to get your the display back up on the presentation. There you go. Beautiful.
All right. Here we go now.
All right.
Sorry about
Yes.
that, everybody.
That was,
So again,
I think we were all jumping up and down and saying, yay.
all right. So again, it's about educating our clients to understand terms that are probably clear to us. We know these terms, but it is educating our clients, making them understand these terms, making them understand, again, what the purpose of a tenant improvement allowance is, what it's going to, what that has to do in relation to their current space. Again, helping them to truly understand what it is that they're paying out of pocket, because that's really the critical thing for every one of my clients, especially for me as a contractor. The first thing that anybody ever does is, how much is this going to cost me? You know, and I try to wave my hands around and go, But so it's important to educate them as to, these are the conditions, this is why. I had a veterinary space just a few months ago, and I told them that it would be $220 a square foot to build out their space, and they couldn't understand that. They said, you know, that's outrageous. But this was a gray shell condition. It didn't have the concrete poured yet. So it was a very, very raw space, and they weren't taking into consideration how much had to go into it to get it to the vanilla shell in order to build out the vet space. So they actually went away from me for a little bit, got somebody else to bid it who didn't understand the conditions of the space, and the bank rejected that bid, ended up having to come back to me, and their space ended up costing about $218 a square foot. But it just, again, it was trying to educate them, and they finally understood that what we were trying to tell them was reality. These are the conditions that we have today. So again, understanding what a gray shell is, making sure that our clients understand that our tenant improvement allowance is typically to get it from a gray shell condition to a vanilla shell condition. It's not to help them defray the cost of their build out. And they need to be very clear on that, because most people think that's going to help, you know, hey, it's going to cost me this much and I'm getting this much money from the landlord. So, hey, they're paying for half of my build out. And that's typically not true. And what a disappointed client when they find that out. So educating them up front is important, helping them understand the gray shell condition, what that means, that this is an as-is condition, the things that it doesn't have, such as the electrical service, the heating and air conditioning, the demising wall, the ceiling systems. So right now in the current market, it's about $65 a square foot to go from a gray shell to a vanilla shell condition. So again, as you're helping your clients negotiate their TI allowance, or you're representing the building, understand right now that that's about where currently the costs are. And that is over 25% of what it was just over a year ago. Again, we have different kind of gray shell conditions, and it's important for our clients to understand that. Sometimes they come with the electrical panel. You know, sometimes they may have the heating and air conditioning up on the roof, but not anything else. It's important for our clients to understand exactly what it is that they're getting and the cost, what it's going to cost them to get it to that vanilla shell condition, so that they understand what they're going to pay out of pocket. So vanilla shell, or warm shell, and again, there's a lot of different variations of that. Typically, you have paint-ready walls. It's a bare floor. You have the ceiling with basic lighting and basic HVAC distribution, basic sprinkler drops if they're there. And typically, a vanilla shell would include a restroom. And so that's what I tell my client what to expect from their, you know, $65 tenant improvement allowance, or whatever their tenant improvement allowance is, that these are the things that they're supposed to go to. There we go, fire sprinkler, HVAC, electrical. So again, you can have a basic vanilla shell, but then you're trying to build out this dental space that you see. So a lot of times we want to tell our client to take the money for the vanilla shell, but not to actually have the vanilla shell built out, because there's so much of it that has to be demoed and taken out in order to create what it is that they're trying to create. So existing conditions, there's a variety of conditions, obviously, and they have an effect on costs. A lot of times when you're going into a building and they've demised the building up, it was a big tenant. We see that a lot now where their larger tenants are going away and they're demising them up into smaller spaces for your tenant. But what they haven't done is they haven't separated the HVAC, or they haven't separated all the electrical. And so we've got crossover between the two spaces. It's important, again, for your client to understand that. Whose responsibility is it to pay for that? I have a vet space down in Corvallis where that's happened, and they've got a lot of crossover, and now she needs to negotiate with the landlord as to who's going to be responsible for separating the two systems, or separating the systems to make sure that each space is on its own system, instead of right now they're sharing. They're sharing some HVAC, they're sharing some electrical, they're on one water meter. You know, how does that, who's going to pay for that? How is that? Is that remote readers? Is she getting a bill from the landlord? Are they getting bills directly from the utilities? It's just very important that your client understand how it is that they're going to, or who's going to be responsible for making sure that these spaces are separated out. In certain parts of Portland, I have a dentist right now who's been trying to buy a building, and all the buildings, they're single phase services. They have enough amperage, so if he just goes in there, oh wow, what happened there? So, you know, he feels like he has enough amperage space, and if you just did a general look at his electrical service, he would seem like he had enough service, but it's a single phase service, and it won't be effective for them. And then you have to be able to go to PGE and find out if there is an ability to bring more electrical into the building. That's not always the case, and it takes a long time for PGE to get back to you, so that extends the lease negotiations out quite a ways. I had a dentist who ended up losing an opportunity on the building because it just took so long for PGE to come back to let them know whether they could upgrade the service or not to make it effective for their use. So it is important, you know, I'm not trying to sell my services here, but I do believe that it's important that you bring a contractor in early on in order to verify certain conditions, such as the electrical service, such as the heating and air conditioning. I had a restaurant owner who took a space, who signed a lease for a space a few years back, and he was so excited. He says, hey, it's already got 5 tons of HVAC, so we're in great shape, except for because he was a restaurant, because of his hood and his makeup air system and the things that he was doing in there, he really needed 8 tons of service. And so he ended up having to add 3 tons of service. He wasn't prepared to do that because he hadn't asked the right questions beforehand to ensure that he was getting everything that he needed to get. Had a restaurant a few years back who, you know, they had restrooms, they had everything set up. He thought it was great. His restrooms were not ADA compliant. Again, any time that you go to build something in the state of Oregon, you have to spend 25% towards ADA upgrades. So anything that's not right now ADA acceptable needs to be upgraded. You can't grandfather them in. People have a tendency to think that they can do that. Oh, I can just grandfather this restroom in because it's already here. That's not true. You have to upgrade them. You have to spend that money towards upgrading them. And so he ended up having to upgrade the restrooms, so they were of no value to him. And then his water service was too small to do what he needed to do in this space. So again, by having your clients sign a lease on a space in which they don't understand all the current conditions, put your client in a very awkward position in which they may end up having to spend tens and thousands of dollars to upgrade things that they thought that they already had. Again, we find that a lot in electrical and in HVAC and all the MEPs, but in restrooms, ADA compliance, it's just very important that your client understands what there is reusable and what cannot be reused because of ADA compliance, or that the MEPs are not up to the standard that they need to be to meet your client's needs. And so that's why, I say involve a trusted professional early. And soft costs. that's something that a lot of my clients are not aware of. Again, educating your clients on what their soft costs can be, it can be very important, especially if you're a medical facility or a restaurant. Your system development charges can be very, very high. I got a vet space that's going out right now in Tannisbourne. He bought a building, he'd already purchased it, and it was a furniture store. And the furniture store is the lowest level of traffic impact fees that can possibly be assessed. He is putting a vet space, and this vet space had the highest amount of traffic assessment that could be. And his traffic assessment fees were $540,000 just for his traffic impact fees. So here he was already committed to buying this building. He had a $2.7 million build out, and he had a $750,000 permit fee that he was not prepared for because no one had talked to him before he bought this building about what the potential fees would be for his system development charges, because he was putting so many more sinks in and waste into the space, and the traffic impact fees because he was bringing so many more clients to the space than the furniture store was. So again, understanding those things and educating your client on that helps you from getting a frustrated client. I mean, this particular doctor, he's a great guy, but he was super frustrated by the fact that he had no anticipation whatsoever that he was going to pay, $750,000 for a permit.
Hey, Rick, we had a question from Stan.
Yes.
He said, how about information on new apartment construction, labor and materials estimate for a basic 3-story apartment with 36 units, total cost per square foot?
Well, I don't do a lot of apartments, so you kind of got me there. I'm going to tell you that the last time that I bid one out, it was about $150 a square foot at that time.
How long ago was that?
But it,
just at a
that was just before COVID hit. Yeah.
Great. Let me pipe
Commercial.
in. Let me put this.
Yeah.
Cliff, we're during COVID, and we walked away at $235 a foot, and that the land was
Okay.
already bought. That was without the land, so it was just strictly construction. So we decided that the numbers didn't work.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rick. Rick, somehow can't hear you. Rick. Something happened with that disconnect just there. Technology. We can all sing a song about technology.
You're first, Cliff.
I'm first. Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, maybe we can write it down. I'm sure, Jonathan, you've been working on that, right?
His microphone is off.
Yeah, no. Yeah, he's basically has to redial in, I think, Carol. Yeah, no, this is unusual to have this level of technical complications because we dry ran this and did not have these issues. So, so this is it's unfortunate, but we appreciate your patience because there's a lot of valuable information that Rick brings to the table. All right, let's see where his number is. Let's see if he's here somewhere. And
Am I back?
you're back.
You're
Perfect.
back.
Perfect.
Yeah. No idea what happened. My phone was working and everything, it seemed like. Anyway. Yeah, I can tell you for a commercial building right now, brick and mortar, depending, on the size of it, so like a 5,000 square foot building is probably about $250 a square feet just for the building shell itself. And then about another $180 for the interior. If the building gets smaller than that, that price goes up dramatically. That's part of the problem. It's very difficult right now. If you wanted to build like a 2,500 square foot building, I would hesitate to have people do that because the costs are just so astronomical that it doesn't really pay itself off. So I try to convince my clients to purchase or to build something that they can have multiple tenants in, just because defraying that cost is the only way to make it feasible at this point right now. Any other questions? So again, we talked a little bit about the system development charges and traffic impact fees. Again, helping your clients to understand the permitting process. Just going back here, a lot of my clients a lot of times don't understand that the permit fees are two separate fees. One's a plan review fee. That's what you have to pay them to get them to review your plans. And the permit fees, that's what you have to pay to release them from hostage. So it is two different fees, and they just need to understand that. Understanding when engineering could be involved. I have a client right now who's building a restaurant, and he wants a mezzanine in the restaurant. There's quite a bit of engineering fees involved in that because there's engineering fees for hanging the hood, and obviously there's engineering fees for the mezzanine as well. So we just, as much as possible, just want to continue to educate our clients on the potential costs of what they want to do. I never want to talk people out of things, but I do want them to understand this is what you're going to run into. You're going to have to pay these fees. It isn't as simple as just putting it up in the air. Other costs to consider, low voltage fees. Typically, your general contractor does not do teledata wiring. And so it's just one other item that they need to take into consideration as they're doing their pro forma. And then signage costs. Again, your general contractor typically doesn't take care of exterior signage, so it's just one other thing that they need to do. Typically, when I give my clients a budget, I give them a below the line list of items that we do not have covered, but they should at least take into consideration before they go to their bank. So as professionals, it's just our responsibility to try to help our clients to navigate through this system as much as possible, to not go to the bank with numbers that are unrealistic or are missing items. So the more that we know, the more, and that's why in my life, I've tried to educate myself on a lot of things that are none of my business, like system development charges and traffic impact fees, because I just wanted my clients to have the best experience possible by ensuring that I told them these things that they had never heard before. I don't know what a system development charge is. What is that? What do you mean? You know, sometimes it makes it so it's not feasible for a client to move ahead and do what they want to do. But at least they didn't get into a situation where they signed a lease and committed to doing a project that they end up really not being able to afford to do because they weren't educated on all the different fees and all the different costs that they could come up to. So your basic office build out right now is somewhere between about $55 to $65 per square foot. And I would just say that that's your basic office space, you know, just a bunch of perimeter offices and cubicles in the center. That's about what it's running right now. And again, you know, when you try to give somebody a budget for their place, you really have to understand their aesthetics and try to get a feel for the range of what they're trying to do. You know, lighting can run anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000. So having a feel for your client, what they're trying to achieve, the look that they're trying to get really helps in order to give them an accurate budget on what it's going to cost them. For a more high-end office, we're talking about more high-end finishes, more cabinetry, upgraded carpet, things like that, is going to be somewhere right now between $75 and $80 a square foot. If you have a real premium build out, such as this is Work & Co. Pretty proud of this project. They actually won an international award. And that was over $100 a square foot. Pretty basic open space, but as you can see, they have a lot of linear ceiling structures and very specific lighting and beautiful space, but not inexpensive. So our final thoughts as I talk to people about engineered versus design build. A lot of people have questions for me about that recently. I have a bank that's doing a vet space for me, and all they did was engineer drawings in the Midwest, I guess, and they don't understand design build. And design build is really that the subcontractors are responsible for doing their own drawings and coming up with their own design for the mechanical, the electrical, and plumbing versus hiring an engineering firm to do that. It's very expensive for an engineering firm to do that. It's typically about $30,000, whereas with your mechanical subs, they do that as the cost of doing business. So I recommend my clients to do that often. You just need to make sure that you're hiring professionals, but if you hire professionals to do the work, shouldn't be a problem. And then the last thing is competitive versus negotiated bids. I prefer that my clients try to get competitive bids. You can have open book. You can ask a client, you can ask your contractor what their fee structure is going to be and to hold them responsible for keeping to their fee structure. But really getting a negotiated bid at this in these days anymore, especially most of the time when we need to get a bid, it's to help them to get a bank loan. All we have is a test fit at the time. And so it's pretty ambiguous. You have to spend a lot of time with the client, getting a feel for their aesthetics, getting a feel for their flow and what they're trying to accomplish to be able to get them a good bid. If you try to get competitive bids in a situation like that, it's really all over the board. And I think it confuses the client most of the time more than helps them out. And that's pretty much my presentation.
Thank you very much. So can you go back and review again the competitive versus negotiated? Because I misunderstood what you said at the end. You say you do like competitive or you do prefer negotiated? I didn't get that.
No, most of the time we try to do negotiated bids. Again, I could show you some of the things. I mean, when your contractor says they bid off of napkin sketches, I truly do bid off of napkin sketches where people try to draw little boxes on a piece of paper and tell me what it is that they're trying to do. And I spend a lot of time with them, again, trying to talk them through, again, if you're building a restaurant or you're building a dental space or I've done hundreds of these. So I'm asking you the right questions. I'm drawing out from you the things that I need to know in order to make sure that you're getting as accurate of a bid as possible. When you do that competitively, that's just very difficult to do unless you're making sure that both those contractors get the exact same information. And that typically doesn't happen. Again, a lot of our clients are uneducated. We're trying to educate them as much as possible, but they don't understand all the time the information that they need to give you. So you have to draw it out of them. And if another contractor who's not as experienced, isn't going to get that same information, and what you have is you have bids all across the board. I mean, it'd be great that every plan that I had was fully drawn out and already stamped and permitted and had all the information we want. And you could competitive bid that all day long. I very rarely get situations like that. And again, most of the time, your clients, before they sign the lease, have to have a good understanding of what it is that it's going to cost them. My responsibility as a contractor, it's a heavy responsibility for me, is if I give you a price before you sign the lease, I need to stay very close to that final price. So I need to get enough information and have enough experience to bid that correctly so that I don't come back with this wildly higher bid after you've signed the lease and gotten your plans. Again, I would go back to, I stood in an empty space and I told the vets that they would spend $220 a square foot on this space. And my bid, when they had their final plans, their permit plans, was $218. That's important for me to be able to do that, because the worst thing in the world is to tell somebody that they can get into a space for $100 a square foot, and when all is said and done, they've signed the lease and they're committed to moving forward, you come back and go, oh, I didn't take that in consideration, or I didn't anticipate that you would want that. It's really going to be $140 a square foot now. That's a terrible thing to do to somebody, and it's obviously a terrible thing to do to your reputation. So that's why I say pick a contractor early, have them walk you through the process, and ensure that you're designing to your budget.
So
and that's another important thing.
Let me ask two more questions here. First of all, Jim asked, is the Portland's facilities permit program still a good option for buildings that have frequent alterations?
It's not as much as it used to be. It used to be a really great program, and that you could start while they were reviewing it and they would come do inspections. They don't do that anymore. It is slightly faster to go through the facilities process to get a permit these days, but so it is still better. It's just not as good as it used to be. It used to be a wonderful program. Now it's a pretty good program.
So now, have you been talking specifically about Portland, or you're talking about Vancouver, Beaverton, Gresham, Lake Oswego, Salem? Give us a sense for, do you have different relationships with the zoning department, or are these costs pretty much reflective of what it's going to be is what it's going to be? It really doesn't make much difference between the town that you're in.
I mean, costs don't make a lot of difference. Permitting costs can. One of the reasons why the traffic impact fees for this one vet space was so high is because it was in Beaverton, which is notorious for having huge traffic impact fees. They're much higher than Portland's. So your municipal fees can be dramatically different depending upon your municipality, but the actual cost of your build out will be the same.
Okay.
And how long? Right now, Portland's a mess. They take the longest to get you a permit. I can get a permit in Beaverton vastly quicker than I can get a permit in Portland.
Right. When you say vastly quicker, would you say that means 1 month, 2 months, a year? How's long taking for a TI permit right now? And the reason I'm asking specifically is, if it takes us a very long time, how in the world do you bid that? How do you get a TI done?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, we hold to our prices. It's tough for us sometimes, but we do hold to our prices. But yeah, I mean, permitting can take as long as 6 months in Portland. I mean, it's a nightmare there right now. I have a restaurant on Mississippi Avenue that's been in permitting for 4 months, and I have no idea. We can't get an answer as to where it's at and when we can expect it. But I can tell you that in Beaverton, I could probably get that same permit in 4 weeks. In Vancouver, it would probably take me 8 weeks. Gresham, probably 4 to 6 weeks. Portland's really the worst, but they're all tough right now. I mean, Clark County's tough right now, but compared to what they used to be, you could get a permit in Vancouver in about 4 weeks. Now it's 6 to 8. So I would tell my clients.
Is that
yeah,
all
it's COVID related. It is. I mean, people working from home, I'm just, whatever. City employees don't work as effectively at home. I'm just telling you that right now. For whatever reason, they don't have it set up properly. I had an inspector tell me he was trying to review something on his phone. I said, on your phone? You don't have a laptop or a desktop at home? I mean, you're really trying to review my plans off your phone? So he's asking me questions. It's hard for me to see. I'm reviewing it off my phone. Okay. So it's been unusual. I don't think that they've adapted as well as they could have. So yeah, it's been tough out there.
Okay. Other questions that people might have regarding current construction market? Really quiet group tonight. Well, Rick's obviously not trying to tell us bad news. I mean, I think what he's trying to tell us is just to try to be realistic. I know that there's a few leasing agents on the phone, not that many. The question is really a tricky one. So you get a great agent like Jim Weirson who has a tenant that wants a build out, and he picks up the phone and says, "Hey, Rick, they want to put in I don't know, not a vet, but let's just say an office build out. How long does it take for you to get it into your queue so you can meet with the tenant and do a test fit and so forth? And how do you handle the draft outline? I mean, do you have a space planner on your team that drafts stuff up, or do you wait for it to be subbed out? What's sort of your approach as Jim is trying to put together some sort of estimate for the owner so the owner can figure out what they're going to do?
Sure. So a lot of that just depends on how complicated the build out's going to be. It may be as simple as me meeting with the client and walking them through it. And we can typically price it out that way. If it's a more complicated build out, like a medical build out, then yes, I have space planners that work for me, and we would go out and do a space plan, or a test fit, I should say. A test fit typically takes us 1 to 2 weeks. Again, it depends upon the complexity of the build out. It takes me another 2 weeks after the test fit is done in order to put together a proposal. So from the time that we first discuss it to the time that you would have your proposal would be about 4 weeks.
Okay, that's good to know. I think that's really helpful information that gives people some sort of realistic thought process to try to, and of course, we need to be somewhat detailed because this is all real stuff. I mean, this is all material you got to get, and it's got to be laid out and so forth. Excuse me. Does anybody have any other questions? Was he really that thorough? Jeez, that's really impressive.
Or I just put them all to sleep.
No, I don't think so. Richard
Yeah,
Larson,
yeah,
you're
right.
not saying anything. I have to go to my man, Richard Larson, and say, hey, Richard, you're not asking any questions. He
Now
fell
we're
asleep.
calling people out.
There, yeah, there I am picking on
Can
him.
I
Guys.
ask a
Mhm.
question?
Yeah, Richard's on. Richard's on. I can see
Yeah,
him
I'm
in a
not
second.
asleep. I was actually typing and listening very intently.
Yeah,
Um,
We're just teasing you. I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, it's okay. I understand the city of Portland is, it seems like there's some improvement lately. Are you seeing improvements in their timelines, Rick, from submittal to issuance?
Unfortunately, I have not yet. I mean, I have a lot of things stuck in Portland right now. And again, it's very difficult. The problem is you used to be able to email somebody and say, hey, could you give me an update on my permit? And they could. And now you can't. I mean, if you go online in the city of Portland, you kind of see, yeah, it went through landscaping, it went through this review or that, but you can't really tell where it's at and where it's going next and how long it will take. And you used to be able to email people and ask them those questions and you could get some fairly accurate answers. You just can't now. Again, I have this restaurant and we sent out a slew of emails today trying to find out where the permit was on it. And we have yet to get a single response.
Mhm.
So
A question about
it's just
budgeting.
tough
Are
out
you
there.
finding- you're actually in the contracting business. So do you find yourself currently bidding projects with good scopes of work and good spec books against other contractors, or are you basically engaged in kind of a cost finding mission with the owner and engaged before the costs are realized?
No, most of the time, most of my clients come to me and I have to try to give them as accurate of a budget as possible before the permitting is done. Actually, most of the time I have to give them as accurate a price as possible before they even sign the lease. So I go in there so that they understand what they're going to spend before they sign the lease, and then they can go to their bank and make sure that they can get finance for that amount. So I actually typically bid out projects, you know, up to 6 months before they actually go into effect, because it's just my typical client base. I don't competitively bid a lot of stuff. Most people just call me. Most of my work is negotiated. I'm well known in the medical field, so I do a lot of medical stuff, and they just call me. But yeah, most of my clients need to know what their costs are going to be before they commit to any space.
Right.
A lot of
Bless you.
times I walk with them when they have like 3 spaces and they're trying to decide which space to take, and I will go and help them to evaluate the spaces so they have a general idea of why one space might cost more than another space. And I give them that general information first. And then once they've chosen the space, then we go to get a test fit, and then we bid that test fit. But we typically try to do all of that before the actual lease negotiations are completed.
Gotcha.
Alessia? Thank you. Thank you for Richard for help.
My question was already answered. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions they want to ask?
I have another question.
Yep.
Where are the greatest impacts on your budgets right now, considering labor or materials? Is it with the trades or is it with the materials? And second part of that question is, what's causing the greatest amount of delays? Because what I would intend to do is avoid those areas.
Yeah, I would think material costs have gone up the quickest. But again, I think because of inflation right now, you're going to see labor costs now start to catch up to that. Again, we just literally just this week gave everybody across the board a 6% raise just because, you know, they're taking pay cuts because of inflation. I think you're going to find that everywhere. So I think that while labor costs have maintained over the past year, they're about to raise sharply. So I just think across the board, everything is going up. I mean, as wages go up, manufacturing costs go up. So I don't see anything, I don't see any one thing particularly over another costing more. I think you're going to see just cost increase across the board. Again, it's been about 25% over the past year. I expect it to be at the very minimum another 10% over the next year. And as far as things that are delayed, again, glass is one of the glass and light fixtures are the two most difficult things to get right now because both of them typically come from out of country. There are fewer glass manufacturers in the United States. One of them just burned down last year, so that even made it less. A lot of glass came out of Canada, and because of the border shutdown, it just made it very difficult to do. Most light fixtures come out of Mexico. And so they just, things crossing the border have taken a very, very long time. There are shortages of raw materials, so things like flooring it's just less. And then what you find now is people don't make things ahead of time as they used to. They wait until they're ordered before they make them. So that delays things as well. I used to do a dental space in 12 weeks. I would just tell people, I've been in it for 20 years. How long does a dental space take? 12 weeks. Doesn't care if it's 5 chairs, 15 chairs, 20 chairs. It just takes 12 weeks. Right now it takes about 16.
Here's one more question. It says, can you discuss, from Bill Jackson, can you discuss cost and availability of MEPs as it affects costs and schedules? And Bill, I'm not sure what an MEP is, so I guess I'm going to learn.
So MEPs are mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And yeah, right now, electrical costs have gone up dramatically. Lighting has gone up dramatically. So my electrical costs, I used to be about 10% of the overall project would be electricals, probably closer to 15% right now. So they have gone up tremendously. Mechanical, depends on the mechanical, where the cost of sheet metal has gone up. So they've gone up. I bid 2 restaurants recently right now, and with the hoods, both those mechanical bids were over $100,000, which is incredible to me. I would say that they would have never been more than 80 2 years ago. So that has gone up a lot. You're right. There is a labor shortage now. And so it is difficult, especially in HVAC. That's probably the hardest trade right now to get on site in a timely manner because they're just, they're overwhelmed right now. I think what you're finding because of the trade shortages and things, what you're going to find is that most trades are going to be foreign born. And you'll see more and more of that as it goes on. All my electricians and every electrical company I work with right now are of Russian descent. And because of their communal nature, they have a easier time finding labor. So I never have an issue with them.
We have a couple more questions. Jonathan, where are you? What was your question?
Oh, right here. No real question, just a 30-second tidbit here. In the world of cost recovery or cost segregation, all improvements for commercial property per the CARES Act is automatically, most of it is 15-year. And what does that mean? Well, it's subject to 100% bonus, so it's expensable. This goes for the tenant that pays for their own improvements. This goes for the landlord that pays for their improvements. And of course, you break out the entire building and you got to look back in a catch-up condition. But in this world of high costs, of hard and soft costs, you've got, at least on the TIs and leasehold improvements, you've got 100% cost recovery as it stands right now at the IRS code. And then you've got disposition opportunities, whatever the heck you tear out of the building and throw in the dumpster and tax year, you get to write off the remaining value of what those numbers are. And of course, we have those numbers. That's as short, as straight as I can give it to you, Cliff, but thank you.
That's pretty short for Jonathan. That's really short. That's said with love. Jim, where's the head? Another question. What's the current per square foot build out for dental and urgent care? Do you have a sense for those, Rick?
Yeah, it's about $160 a square foot right now. So that's middle of the road. It can go up from there. It's not going to go down from there much, but yeah, right now it's running about $160 a square foot.
Okay, great. All right, I think we're at the witching hour. If there are no other questions, I think we should thank Rick for what was a very thoughtful and incisive presentation, and very, very thorough. It gives everybody a chance. Oh, somebody just slid in one more question. We'll do one more. Yeah, Bill, we got it. We got it. I got it. Yeah, please, please, please. And it says, can you share with us what you're currently seeing in Portland in TI allowance from landlords on vanilla shell build out? Did I say that right,
Sure.
Bill?
I do wish to qualify that. I did that very thing that I hate people to do to my clients. When somebody asked me what a build out was for a dental space, and I said $160 a square foot, that's from a vanilla shell condition. And I do that. I'm as bad as everybody else. We whip out those numbers like that, and then our clients don't understand when they go into a gray shell space. And this is the issue that we run into, that didn't include bringing that space to the vanilla shell condition. So we have to be so careful when we give our clients numbers that we understand what that starting point is, because it makes all the difference in the world. Anyway, as far as TI allowance go, right now they're not really keeping up with the cost. So they're still ranging around the $55 a square foot range, and it is less than what it takes to bring it to the vanilla shell condition.
Yeah, I think that's sort of almost a leasing question, where our landlords are rather wait for a tenant that needs a less of a build out than spend more money on a more extensive build out. But they'll maybe do a longer term lease. They might do a 10-year lease and find a middle road, but definitely they have to offset that cost because the numbers just don't work at all, Bill. I mean, they just, at $160 a foot, and I'm not being negative about the cost structure, it's almost impossible for a landlord to write that off as part of a cost of a building. It's just there's just not enough money coming in to offset that in the rent. And all the other increases. Remember, taxes in Multnomah County alone went up 9% this year. I mean, that, and in other counties averaging 6%. So we're seeing significant increases in operational costs across the board for all commercial buildings. And so, people are being beat up quite a bit. And so they're just trying to figure out, how do I make this work? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah. Longer term leases is something that I have seen a lot more of. I just had a client complain to me because the landlord wanted them to sign a 10-year lease. And I told her that I thought that was fine. That wasn't untypical anymore. But yeah, you see that a lot more locally.
We're seeing a lot of long-term leases for medical in particular because it's such an expensive building.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're pleased that you came. Richard is saying goodbye. Everybody else is saying goodbye. So we'll see you all next time. We already have topics. I think we're thinking about tax laws in the spring, what's changing in taxes, and maybe even something in cost segregation. So anyway, see you guys later. Have a nice evening. Thank you for joining us. Take care.